Here is part of the interesting dynamic of this is we are all wired differently. We all have various interests or rathers or passions or movies or social media or not social media or go down the list of things. And that sometimes that isn't a right or wrong thing. It's just a thing. It's just kind of how God has wired us in some ways. Not always. Sometimes there's a bit of cultural dynamics at play. But let's just go over then. Let's review kind of rather quickly the entire booklet. And again, we're not going to have time to go through the entire thing detail by detail. But I am going to kind of fly through a little bit. If you remember the first week, we kind of got into just some of the passage where, well, if you go back to Psalm 139 and Jeremiah 29:11, where God has wonderfully knit us together, and God does have some sort of plan for our life. What that plan is, I can't tell you. I can't even promise you, and I don't even pretend to know what that plan is. There is a plan of God and is orchestrated in some form or fashion. All I can say is I hope that you choose to follow after Christ. And there is a wonderful plan for that, for those that do. For those that reject Christ, the ending of that plan is not so good. So, and I don't understand all of that, but I know that we are all wonderfully made. And so here's some of the questions that we're trying to really wrestle with tonight. What do you want to be when you grow up? What kinds of things would find the most satisfaction in your life? How has God wired me to serve? What's God's will for my life? In a lot of ways, that's a fairly simple question. He made us to make disciples. That is the first and foremost thing. If you're not making disciples, then you're not following through in God's will. But how we go about making disciples and reproducing disciple makers is part of the bigger question that we're wrestling with, because we all like different things, and that's okay. So some of us, we got into the first week, you got into talents, and that was kind of the first part of the book, the notebook there, where we looked at the different talents and those that are realistics, those that are investigative type people, artistic, socials, enterprisers, conventionals. We kind of went through some of that. If you forgot it, go back and review it in your book, as we're not going to take all the time to go through it here. But remember, then, we all have different spiritual gifts for those that are believers, okay? Now, again, this is important. If you have chosen to follow Christ, at the moment that you did that, the Holy Spirit enters your life, enters into you, and there's a mystery to that. But as the Holy Spirit guides you, He gives you direction and purpose in your life, but He also gives you various gifts in which to accomplish that. And we all have different unique gift sets, and that's okay. So, and we'll kind of talk a little bit about that. So the hard part is, though, we've got to figure out what each of our spiritual gifts are as a believer. And if you're not a believer, again, that's the first thing. You got to figure that out first. So we will not really live life to its fullest until we actually do figure this out. And so, as you see, we talked through the spiritual gifts. Then we got into last week the personality types, which then there's all kinds of fun you can have with that. There's the Myers-Briggs test, which you get into INFJs and ENFPs, and I myself am an ENFP. You can look that up as to see how that describes. I'm very much the extroverted person. Many of you probably have figured that out by now. But it also, personality types help you appreciate others. And if you remember the DISC personality thing as well, those are just tools to help you kind of figure out like how you are naturally kind of just made. Now, again, you got to be careful because you don't want to pigeonhole somebody as they're trying to figure out more of their personality type. And sometimes taking these tests early on, I think there is a little bit of an issue that sometimes you don't quite know how to answer because you haven't quite figured out what you really like. But I think generally speaking, you have a pretty good idea, and that will clarify as you get older. I think is probably more really what's going on there. There's also another one that I didn't even get to last week, which is a great one. It's called the Strength Finders test. You can do it online, and then there's like 26 different attributes, I guess you might say. Like for me, my number one thing is belief. Like you get me talking about issues of belief and right, wrong, theories and that kind of thing. That gets me wired. I get super excited about that. Belief, empathy, and empathy not in the sense of I feel ooey gooey, but an empathy that is much more like a intuition, like mother's intuition, except this case it's dad. I just have a natural bent to kind of see things, not before they happen, but kind of just sense that this is the thing that needs to happen. That's kind of me. Belief, empathy, connectedness. Like I like to connect all the pieces. Like if you get me talking about the church and how I can connect younger, older, and everything like that, that gets me fired up real quick. And then as far as even developer, I am that's another one of my strengths. I love to develop and see people reach their potential. If that's something you've never done, you ought to do that. That is an incredibly helpful tool. We've done it with all of the adult volunteers. In fact, I have a chart that has them all mapped out. It's kind of funny to look at, actually, because when you look at it, you can definitely go, oh, yeah, that explains a lot. And sometimes it's kind of funny. Other times it's just kind of interesting. But again, personality things play into how we are, how we function, and just kind of who we are. The other one that we didn't really talk about, which kind of fits into this thing, is the love languages. There's 5 different love languages that we all have, we all do, and we all like. Some of us, we love to give or get gifts. Some of us, we love or like to give like hugs or big high fives or pats on the back or whatever, that kind of thing. The other thing is quality time. You just like to go hang out with your friend. The other is acts of service. And so you like to do things that are helpful. Other is words of affirmation. And so like for me, my love languages are basically, my top 3 are touch and words of affirmation. Those are kind of generally speaking mine. Quality time kind of fits in there a little bit. And that's so like, if you want to communicate like you care for me, that would be kind of how you would do it. But that isn't the case for everybody. Not everybody likes a hug or likes high fives or likes encouraging words. Sometimes people go, oh, that just feels weird. That's okay. But I promise you, if you can figure that out about yourself and you can figure that out about your best friend, that will help your relationship. And I promise you it'll be a giant issue when it comes to your spouse. Like if you guys can figure out how to communicate what the other person's love language is, the better. Like for instance, Janie, my wife, I told you already, like a touch and words of affirmation. Janie is much more a gifts person. She loves little, it doesn't have to be big giant gifts. She likes, it doesn't even matter. It could be little things. Like I could bring her a Coke a Diet Dr. Pepper from Quick Trip and just give it to her and go, here you go. That means a lot to her because she just likes little gifts or little thoughtful things. And again, the more you realize that about your spouse or your significant other, the more it will help your relationship. So, personality types, they go through some of this, and we've kind of talked about all of this already. Getting energized by the outside world, what's going on in your head, paying more attention to the big picture and so forth. Personality types are God-given. There are no bad personality types. So, again, we've kind of already gone through some of this. This is some of the Myers-Briggs kind of stuff. Again, you can review that in your book if you want. This kind of goes along with the DISC thing as well. And if you remember, again, it goes back to Psalm 139 where God said, I have made you, and I have knit you together in your mother's womb. So from the very beginning, God was at work in you and forming you. So, whoa. Here we go. So, passions. This is tonight, and we're going to kind of wrap this all up tonight and tie this together here. So, I think, okay, here we go. I think this is yeah, there we go. Passion. So here's the last one. This is actually just the last page. It says enthusiasm, identifying my God-given passion. It's the very last page of your book. Well, the inside of the last page, not the very back of the last page. So it should say enthusiasm at the top. So what is a passion? Basically caring about something bigger than yourself, something vital to you, a powerful emotion, a zeal, you might say. To be enthused means to be, technically it means from the Greek, in theos, or with God. You are full of God, basically, is kind of what enthusiasm really, that's where it comes from. So a worthwhile passion is anything that you pursue with God and thus is truly life-changing. So this is the kind of thing that drives you. Like, what are you passionate about? And some of you are still probably figuring this out a little bit. But what is it that you get worked up about, that you would do anything to either fix or stop, or could be a lot of things. Could be a sport. You could say, I am passionate about football, and everything I do revolves around football and bringing honor to God through football. Could be. Maybe it's something else. Let's move on here. So, passions. You don't even have to act on your passions only through the church. You could be a believer, but not necessarily be working in the church. There's lots of different examples of that. There's movies like Bruce Almighty, Evan Almighty. I mean, there's lots of other Christian movies, or movies that aren't necessarily Christian, but were made by Christians. Or even there's all kinds of music. You too, if you know anything about me, I follow them fairly significantly. They started out basically as a youth worship band. I mean, that's what they started out as. And they got told, and here's kind of how the story progressed a little bit. They got told by their youth pastor, hey, either you're going to have to choose to follow God, or you can't, basically what they was told to them, you can't be a Christian and make good music. And they looked at him and said, no, that's stupid. And they went out and said, we're going to be a band of Christians and go out and change the world through our music. And that's basically, if you look at anything that has to do with record sales, you could make a pretty strong case that they have done that. But you don't have to necessarily serve strangers either. So passions can involve a lot of different things. So what is my passion? So here's a way to start to figure this out. What do I get excited about? If I had no fear of failure, what would I attempt for God? If I knew I couldn't fail, what would I do for God? Why? If I had unlimited resources, the thing I'd most love to do for God's kingdom would be what? I could give you an idea if you had unlimited resources. The church needs a new building. So if you happen to stumble upon unlimited resources anytime in the next couple days, let us know, let Rich know. It would be very important and vital to our church growth. But you get the idea. At the end of my life, I would like to look back and know I had done something about what? Or do I just go along in life and go, ho hum, time to play Minecraft, ho hum, time to play Fortnite, ho hum. I mean, is that really what you want to be known by? I mean, is that what your end of your life? In fact, I mean, that's really I think when you write your epitaph on your tombstone, what do you want it to say? Like, and I'm not dissing on video games, because you can make an argument that I want to be one of the best video game players in the world for God. And you can make an argument for that. And I would totally understand that. What ministries, causes, or needs concerns me the most? Like when I sit at home at night and I think about what ministry or causes or needs do I get most worked up about? That's probably a passion. So, here's what I want us to do tonight. One, we're going to break up into groups for a little bit, and I want you to kind of work through these questions together. And so you might actually split into group, but then you might take a couple minutes to just kind of work through that page, all right? And then we're going to actually come back together for the last 10, 15 minutes or so, and we're going to kind of put this all together, because here's what happens is when you start to put your passions and your gifts and your interests together, and you can actually look on it on the back last page if you want to, then you start to figure out where God has made me that I will best fit and where I will best serve and where I will find the most joy and happiness and excitement and enthusiasm about doing. And here's the trick, because if you can translate that into your job, then one, you're going to be able to go into college. You're going to know exactly where you're going to want to go. You're going to save yourself a ton of money, and then you're going to come back to me and say, thank you, Reg, so much. I want to buy you dinner. And you think I'm joking, but if you take me seriously, I promise you that will happen. I can guarantee you, you will save yourself a ton of money in college and beyond if you begin to understand these things and you begin to identify how you are wired and you start to pursue a job or a way to serve in those areas, and you will find such joy and satisfaction in doing what you were meant to do.